Welcome to Quantum Mind Hub Stories. Before we dive in, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with friends. Remember to drop your thoughts, perspectives, and lessons learned in the comments section. Alright, get comfy, let's get started. Dante's night began with thunderous arguments in the gilded halls of an exclusive gala where the clinking of champagne glasses masked the storm brewing inside him. Vanessa, his glamorous yet toxic fiancée, had unleashed a torrent of vitriol that pushed Dante past his breaking point. Her words, dripping with betrayal and envy, echoed in the cavern of his aching pride. In a haze of inebriation and raw anguish, he slammed the doors behind him and stormed out into the cold, unforgiving streets. The city, wrapped in its nocturnal splendor and urban grit, bore witness to his reckless escape. Driving erratically through the deserted avenues, the blur of neon lights and reflective puddles only deepened his sense of isolation. Then, in one heart-stopping moment, his car collided with something or someone that crashed into his consciousness like a thunderclap. In a split second, Dante's eyes caught sight of a lone figure sprawled by the curb. The impact had thrown the figure, a homeless young woman with wild, expressive eyes, onto the unforgiving concrete. Despite the pounding in his chest and the roaring engine, Dante's focus shifted to the vulnerable form on the sidewalk. "What have I done?" he muttered under his breath, reaching out with trembling fingers to check for a pulse. The chaotic symphony of the night fell silent for a moment as he knelt beside her, the adrenaline of the crash mixing with a gnawing sense of guilt. In that gritty twilight, as the city whispered dark secrets through the alleyways, Dante faced a truth he could no longer ignore. His life was at a crossroads, and the choices made in this fateful hour would ripple across the fragile tapestry of his future. Paralyzed by shock and remorse, Dante wrestled with the weight of responsibility as he stared into the homeless girl's limp form on the rain-slicked pavement. The sound of his own heavy breaths filled the quiet void left in the aftermath of the collision. In the reflective shards of shattered glass, he saw not just his drunken recklessness, but a mirror of his inner decay. A man adrift after a disastrous split with Vanessa. Torn between self-preservation and an emerging, fragile empathy, he made a split-second decision. With no phone, no witness, and a heart pounding with silent terror of impending disaster, Dante cradled the unconscious girl into his arms. The city, indifferent yet ever watchful, blurred past him as he raced toward his mansion. A lavish citadel starkly contrasting with the gritty streets. Inside his opulent home, the atmosphere shifted from cold indifference to frantic urgency. He summoned his private doctor, a man known more for discretion than for medical ethics, and poured large sums of cash in whispered negotiations for silence. As the doctor's skilled hands tended to the battered stranger, Dante hovered nearby, torn by guilt and the desperate need to bury this unspeakable mistake. In the sterile light of the mansion's hallways, the weight of his actions pressed upon him. The girl awoke amid soft murmurings and the clinical scent of antiseptic, confused and terrified, her eyes searching for meaning in a reality that had become alien to her. Dante's internal battle intensified. Should he remain the unrepentant millionaire clinging to a crumbling image of perfection, or dare to face the moral abyss that now defined his existence? The tension of that fateful night cloaked the mansion in a palpable dread, signaling that nothing would ever be the same again. As dawn broke over the sprawling urban skyline, the mansion's opulence contrasted sharply with the disquiet simmering within its walls. Dante, wrestling with mounting anxiety and regret, observed the early light cast long shadows over the remnants of his impulsive act. Ray, the homeless girl whose life he had inadvertently endangered, lay awake in a sparsely furnished bedroom, a room that, despite its plush decor, felt alien and cold. Her first moments of consciousness were fraught with panic and uncertainty. "Where am I? Who are you?" she demanded in a shaky whisper, her eyes wide with fear and suspicion. Dante, still reeling from his own inner turmoil, attempted to stammer an explanation, his words thick with the haze of regret. He offered a tentative promise, "You're safe here. I'll take care of you." Yet, beneath his seemingly sincere utterance, guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. The power dynamic was immediately apparent. Dante was the master of this luxurious domain, while Ray was a lost soul unexpectedly thrust into a world of privilege and secrets. Despite his assurances, she remained skeptical, her heart armored by years of hardship on the unforgiving streets. In that fraught moment, a silent pact formed between them, a mutual understanding that neither could fully trust the other, yet both were compelled by forces beyond their control. As Ray's eyes darted about the lavish room filled with relics of a life of wealth, she sensed that behind every ornate detail lurked hidden imperfections. For Dante, the mansion was a gilded cage, a monument to the life he once thought he controlled. Now, it served as the battleground for an uneasy truce between a broken man and a woman whose life had been nothing but scars and survival. In the muted light of the morning, with despair intermingled with fleeting hope, the stage was set for a drama that neither could escape. The tension in the mansion grew as word of the accident began to seep into the undercurrents of the city's rumor mill. Vanessa, ever the vindictive socialite, had caught wind of the incident through her labyrinth of whispering connections. Fueled by jealousy and a desperate need to maintain her flawless public persona, she saw Ray not as a victim of circumstance but as a pawn in her cruel game. Vanessa's arrival was nothing short of dramatic, a tempest in designer heels. When she burst through the grand entrance, her eyes sparkled with a malicious light as she demanded answers. "Dante, what kind of man are you if you're willing to risk everything for a stray like her?" she hissed, her voice slicing through the air with venom. The confrontation escalated in real time, drawing the attention of onlookers and threatening to spiral into a scandal that would shake the very foundations of Dante's empire. Amid the clamor, Vanessa unspooled a damning piece of evidence. Old footage showing Ray huddled in a frigid park, her dignity in tatters, a stark image designed to undermine her legitimacy. "She's nothing but trash, a gold digger waiting for someone to pocket her misfortune," Vanessa proclaimed, each word crafted to evoke revulsion and stoke public fury. Dante, caught in the middle, felt his carefully constructed world crumble as the media's hungry eyes began to close in. Amid the chaos, he could only offer a weak defense, his voice losing its strength. "I did what I had to do to save her," his words faltered, leaving behind an echo of despair that resonated in the charged air. The staged confrontation not only shattered his public image but also sowed the seeds of an unanticipated alliance, one that would force him to confront the truth about himself and the dark secrets that both he and Ray had long harbored. As rumors morphed into relentless tabloid headlines, the mansion's once pristine corridors now echoed with the consequences of Dante's fateful decision. Hidden away from prying eyes, Dante and Ray began an awkward cohabitation that was as much a psychological battleground as it was a shelter from the prying chaos of the outside world. Ray's nights were filled with turbulent dreams of past neglect and the pain of a society that had long dismissed her existence, while Dante's restless nights were haunted by the memory of the crash and the echoes of Vanessa's venomous words. Their interactions, fraught with tension and raw vulnerability, gradually peeled away the facades that both had so desperately clung to. In quiet moments, over shared meals in candlelit dining rooms, conversations bloomed unexpectedly. Ray revealed fragments of a once bright future, a passion for journalism and an ambition that was systematically trampled by the unforgiving streets. Dante, in turn, disclosed the hidden scars of losing his beloved brother in a similar, catastrophic crash, a loss that had silently festered within him for years. The mansion became a crucible where guilt, forgiveness, and a tentative hope for redemption met in an uneasy dance. Their growing proximity was a double-edged sword, fierce enough to forge an unexpected bond, yet precarious enough to spark explosive confrontations at any misstep. The interplay of power between them twisted into a complex relationship defined by dependency and mutual curiosity. Each secret shared and every painful memory recounted deepened their connection, blurring the lines between rescuer and saved. The city's distant neon pulses seemed to echo with silent approval as their private world, ignited by vulnerability, began to echo with the bittersweet strains of potential love and inevitable betrayal. The fragile truce between Dante and Ray was abruptly complicated when Dante proposed an audacious plan to salvage his crumbling public image. With rumors running rampant and Vanessa's relentless vendetta threatening to strip him of everything, he conceived an idea both ludicrous and strangely desperate, an engagement to Ray that was designed more as a shield than a celebration of love. "This is our only chance to stop the media circus," Ray, Dante insisted, his voice a mix of urgency and regret as they sat together in the quiet solitude of his study. Ray, whose heart was already weathered by years of abandonment, felt the sting of betrayal at the thought that her pain was being used as a prop in his public relations campaign. "You're asking me to be your savior? Or maybe your scapegoat," she snapped, eyes flashing with anger and hurt. The proposal was a cruel twist of fate, a calculated move by Dante to masquerade as the repentant hero, while shielding his crumbling empire from an onslaught of scrutiny. Vanessa's influence, though absent physically, loomed large like a specter in the background, further tainting the proposal with bitterness. Dante's plan was simple: stage a fairy tale romance that would distract the public and obscure the truth of the accident. Yet, for Ray, the notion of playing along felt like a betrayal of her hard-won dignity. In that charged moment, an undeniable tension took root, one that combined revulsion, desperation, and an unexpected glimmer of hope. The idea that maybe, just maybe, she could reclaim a voice in her story was both tempting and terrifying. And so, amidst a tangle of conflicting emotions, an unspoken bargain was struck. Despite her fury, Ray conceded, driven by an internal resolve to seize control of her destiny, even if it meant stepping into a role she never wanted. As they locked eyes, both knew this fragile alliance would soon be tested in ways neither could ever predict. With the engagement announcement made, the city quickly transformed Dante and Ray's private tragedy into an epic public spectacle. Paparazzi lurked like vultures around every corner of the mansion, their cameras snapping incessantly, capturing every whispered word and every stolen glance. Every news bulletin turned their story into a modern-day fairy tale, replete with scandal, heartbreak, and the promise of redemption. Overnight, Dante's sophisticated image was painted with strokes of vulnerability and remorse, while Ray was likened to a phoenix emerging from the ashes of neglect. Strangers debated in cafes and on social media, their opinions as varied as the city's vibrant streets. Yet, beneath the glitz and theatrics of this staged romance, a storm was quietly gathering force. In the depth of this newly forced intimacy, Ray began to transform. A metamorphosis marked not by superficial makeovers, but by a sudden striking assertiveness that radiated from within. Her once tentative posture gave way to a newfound strength as she navigated the swirling chaos of their makeshift engagement. In moments stolen between posed smiles for the media and genuine exchanges far from the prying cameras, she started to reclaim the narrative of her own life. Dante, too, underwent a subtle shift. The act of posing as a redeemer, albeit for his own benefit, forced him to confront parts of himself long buried under a veneer of wealth and entitlement. "I never imagined I could feel this human," he confided during one quiet evening, the mansion's grandeur fading into the background as he listened to the honest cadence of Ray's story. As the facade of their public persona began to crack, the two found themselves at a crossroads, torn between the roles they were forced to play and the genuine human connection that was emerging beneath. But fate, relentless in its pursuit of irony, had yet another bitter twist in store for them. The facade they had built together was irrevocably shattered the moment a disquieting folder was discovered. Ray, while rummaging through Dante's private study in a moment of curiosity and newfound courage, came across a sealed envelope addressed to her. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal, revealing a series of documents and photographs that peeled back the layers of deception. The evidence was damning. Dante had known who she was long before their fateful encounter, and he had orchestrated their entire entanglement with an ulterior motive. In a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak, Ray confronted him with the damning revelations. "How could you keep this from me? Was I just another pawn in your twisted game?" she demanded, her voice quivering with the raw intensity of betrayal. Dante, caught in the crossfire of his own ambitions and secrets, felt the weight of the past crush him. He had meticulously planned the engagement not solely to rescue his reputation but also to bury a personal history he'd long hoped to forget, one that tied his past indiscretions to the very identity of the woman before him. In that searing moment, the mansion's luxurious walls seemed to close in, echoing with the sound of shattered trust. Vanessa's vengeful influence re-emerged in the background, her shadow stretching across the exposed truths like an ominous specter. As the live cameras of tabloid reporters captured the dramatic confrontation, Dante stammered out a half-hearted apology, while Ray's eyes brimmed with tears of disgust and resolve. The public, hungry for scandal and authenticity in equal measure, reveled in the unmasking of secrets. The spark of their once fragile connection was now replaced by the embers of betrayal and a bitter desire for justice. A desire that promised to reshape both their lives in ways no one could ever have anticipated. With the shattering of trust came a dramatic public reckoning that swept through both the social elite and the everyday citizens of the city. Dante, now stripped of the carefully crafted veneer of indestructibility, took to the media in a bold press conference that stunned even the most cynical of onlookers. Standing at a podium before a sea of cameras and microphones, he recounted the night of the crash in a voice heavy with remorse. "I made a mistake, a choice I wish I could undo," he declared, his words resonating with an authenticity that cut through the typical corporate spin. In this rare moment of vulnerability, he also revealed the truth behind his intentions, admitting that his attempt to shelter Ray was a desperate bid to salvage not only his reputation but also a part of his shattered soul. The confession was met with a mixture of incredulity, sympathy, and moral outrage. Public sentiment, swinging like a pendulum between outrage and reluctant admiration, cast Dante in a new light. The donation of millions to homeless shelters was a symbolic gesture meant to atone for the tragedy that had ensnared them both. From a distance, Ray watched the unfolding drama with conflicted emotions, tears mingled with a simmering anger and a hint of something like hope. She recognized in Dante's raw honesty the faint pulse of redemption, yet she was unable to forget the betrayal that had upended her already fragile existence. The city, ever watchful and unforgiving, braced itself as the saga teetered between retribution and the possibility of renewal. In that electrifying atmosphere, every headline and whispered conversation hinted at the possibility of a second chance, a way to rebuild amidst the ruins of a public scandal that had captured the hearts and despairs of an entire metropolis. Days morphed into weeks as the fallout from Dante's confession and public act of contrition rippled across every corner of the urban landscape. The mansion, once a symbol of unchecked opulence and concealed sins, slowly transformed into a battleground for public opinion and internal redemption. Behind its walls, the tumultuous drama between Dante and Ray was far from over. Now, the emotional aftermath of their exposure was deepening into a slow-burning transformation. Dante spent long hours alone, haunted by memories of familial loss, personal failure, and the realization that his attempt to rewrite his destiny had cost him the very thing he most coveted: genuine human connection. Every creaking floorboard in his grand home echoed with the ghosts of regret. Ray, on the other hand, emerged from the ordeal with a hardened resolve. The pain of betrayal, though searing, had ignited within her a desire to reclaim her narrative. Once dismissed and ignored, she now sought to become a beacon for those whose voices had long been silenced by society's callous indifference. In hushed, clandestine meetings with old friends from the streets, Ray began to gather support and share her story in small, yet powerfully evocative sessions. She reconnected with the passion for journalism she had once nearly abandoned, determined to use her pen to expose truths and advocate for the voiceless. As the public continued to debate the unfolding scandal, a dramatic shift was underway, one that signified the slow but steady march toward redemption for both her and Dante. Their intertwined fates, marred by betrayal and illuminated by a glimmer of hope, had now become a story of transformation and deeply personal justice, echoing far beyond the mansion's walls and into the hearts of an entire city. In the echoing corridors of time and memory, the mansion now stood as a silent witness to the storm of emotions that had reshaped its inhabitants. Dante, still reeling from the aftershocks of public confession, found himself confined to introspection, a self-imposed exile within the confines of his own success. Late at night, with the hum of the city outside serving as both a distraction and a reminder of his fallen ideals, he retraced the events of that fateful night. Every detail, every painful mistake, tormented him relentlessly. In these moments of solitary reckoning, Dante began to understand that his world of unyielding wealth and privilege had never truly shielded him from the consequences of his actions. The confession that had once seemed like an act of desperation was gradually evolving into a sincere effort at personal transformation. Meanwhile, Ray's journey took an equally profound turn. The betrayal by the one man who had promised to care for her had hardened her resolve to rise above the scars of the past. Reinventing herself as a warrior for the voiceless, Ray began to document the overlooked narratives of the city, stories of hardship, perseverance, and relentless hope, in clandestine corners of urban cafes and makeshift enters, her voice transformed into that of an empowered storyteller. Conversations over steaming cups of coffee and scattered scribbles on napkins soon morphed into powerful narratives that echoed on social media, stirring empathy and igniting debates. The city, with its streets forever pulsing with stories of survival, became the unlikely stage on which both Dante and Ray struggled to find meaning in their shared tragedy. Their individual quests for redemption, though painfully different, were inextricably linked by the common thread of human frailty and the enduring hope for forgiveness. Each night, the city lights blinked like beacons of resilience, urging them to confront the darkness within and forge a path toward redemption and renewal. As time passed, a period of uneasy calm settled over the city like a fragile truce after a tempest. Dante and Ray, two unlikely protagonists of this urban drama, found their lives slowly converging towards an inevitable climax. Dante's public attempts at redemption, the generous donations, heartfelt interviews, and quiet moments of remorse, had begun to soften the critical gaze of a society too often quick to judge. Yet, beneath the surface of his public transformation lurked an unmistakable undertone of regret and self-reproach, a stark reminder of the man he once was. Every gesture of goodwill was accompanied by the memory of that terrible night and the guilt that never truly abated. For Ray, the journey was equally fraught with internal battles. Rebuilding her identity, long overshadowed by the stigma of homelessness and neglect, meant confronting deep-seated wounds and redefining her worth on her own terms. In the dim light of early morning meetings and fervent community gatherings, she found herself stepping into a role of leadership, a beacon for those whose voices had been lost in the cacophony of urban life. Conversations with community elders and impassioned debates in small local forums became her new battleground, where her narrative was being rewritten not as a victim but as a champion of change. Despite the lingering tension between her and Dante, a tension born of betrayal and bittersweet vulnerability, their shared history forged an unspoken connection. Late-night discussions that once teetered on anger now occasionally dipped into sincere revelations about the price of redemption and the possibility of genuine transformation. The city, with its labyrinth of alleys and echoing footsteps, served as a constant reminder that every soul had a story written in its scars. And as both Dante and Ray navigated their separate paths, there remained a sliver of hope that one day their intertwined fates might lead them to a moment of true reconciliation where the past could finally be forgiven and the future embraced with open hearts. In the midst of personal struggles and public scrutiny, life continued to weave its complex tapestry of unexpected encounters and painful lessons. Dante, whose soul had grown increasingly weary under the strain of his own guilt, sought solace in quiet walks through the city's underlit streets. He began frequenting a modest cafe on a busy corner, seeking moments of anonymity amid the ceaseless whirlwind of headlines and gossip columns. There, in the muted hum of daily life, he observed the simplest acts of kindness, a shared laugh between strangers, a comforting word in the midst of a hectic rush that gently eroded the edges of his inner despair. His reflections grew deeper, and slowly Dante started to understand that redemption was not found in grand gestures but in the small, genuine moments of connection with those around him. Meanwhile, Ray's journey took her into the heart of the community she had long distrusted. Embracing her newfound role as a storyteller, she visited rundown neighborhoods, community shelters, and intimate gatherings where the forgotten voices of the city found refuge. The raw narratives of hardship intermingled with sparks of hope, and each story she documented served as both a healing balm for the wounds of the past and a rallying cry for a brighter future. One brisk evening, over an unexpectedly warm cup of tea and soft whispers of shared memories, Ray met an elderly woman who had once been a renowned journalist, now relegated to recounting the city's hidden truths from behind closed doors. Their conversation, filled with unvarnished honesty and gentle encouragement, reignited Ray's commitment to reclaim her own narrative. It was in these subtle moments of interaction, far from the prying eyes of the media, that the foundations of change were being laid, one heartfelt story at a time. As the city continued to pulse with life, Dante and Ray, bound by memories and mutual longing for transformation, started to see that the journey toward personal redemption was often messy, unpredictable, and achingly beautiful. Gradually, the shifting tides of public perception began to mirror the internal metamorphosis that both Dante and Ray were undergoing. For Dante, every day became a lesson in humility as he immersed himself in volunteer work at local shelters and community centers. The opulence of his mansion, once a testament to his untouchable status, now symbolized the vast gap between the life he had led and the life he was determined to rebuild. The glittering lights of the city reflected in his tearful eyes as he handed out hot meals to those who were once invisible to him. His public appearances, though infrequent, were laden with sincerity, a quiet, unpolished vulnerability that slowly won over skeptical hearts. Meanwhile, Ray was forging her own path in the realm of public discourse. With a notebook clutched tightly in her hand and a pen that spilled the truth with unyielding force, she began hosting small, impromptu sessions on street corners and community halls. Her words carried the weight of experience and raw emotion, capturing the attention of listeners who had long been accustomed to silence and apathy. Her voice, once mired in despair, now resonated with a steady determination to rewrite the narrative of her life and uplift others trapped in their own cycles of hardship. The city itself seemed to breathe alongside them, a living, unpredictable entity that embraced transformation even in its darkest corners. In hushed conversations, the residents of the urban maze began to see Dante not as a fallen icon but as a man striving for redemption, and Ray as a beacon of hope emerging from the grit of everyday struggle. Their individual journeys, marked by moments of faltering steps and triumphant breakthroughs, slowly merged into a collective call for justice, empathy, and the relentless pursuit of truth. With each passing day, beneath the neon glow of a city that refused to sleep, hope took root in the hearts of those who had come to believe that even the most devastating mistakes could eventually yield seeds of redemption. As autumn deepened, casting long shadows over cobblestone streets and forgotten parks, the inevitability of the reckoning between past and present loomed ever closer. Dante and Ray, each scarred by their personal histories, found themselves drawn into a final confrontation with the ghosts that had haunted them for far too long. One chilly evening, as the city's hustle wound down to a somnolent lull, they met in a deserted park under a canopy of starlight. The park, a relic of simpler times with faded benches and whispering trees, became the stage for an emotionally charged dialogue, a meeting of wounded souls desperate for solace and truth. Dante, his voice heavy with regret, recounted the myriad moments of his life that had led him to this crossroads, from careless indulgences to the quiet despair of solitude. "I was lost in a world of illusions," he confessed, his words hanging in the crisp air like fragile confessions. Ray, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, countered with memories of abandonment and the harsh lessons of survival that had shaped her essence. "Your promises were lies," she retorted bitterly, the raw sting of betrayal mingling with a spark of defiance. Yet, amid the torrent of emotions and accusations, a fragile, unspoken understanding began to emerge, a shared recognition that their intertwined fates were as much a product of circumstance as they were of choice. The conversation moved slowly, tentatively revisiting the darkest corners of their past, as if every word spoken might either mend or utterly shatter the fragile bridge between them. In the distance, the city hummed with the noise of life, an ever-present reminder that time marched forward, indifferent to individual pain. That night, under a tapestry of shimmering stars, Dante and Ray silently vowed that even the deepest wounds could someday heal. Their hearts, bruised yet unyielding, held the promise of a future where truth and forgiveness might finally coexist. The moment was both bitter and beautiful, a glimpse of a possibility where redemption was not just a distant dream but an achievable reality. The days that followed that fateful meeting in the park became a period of profound self-examination and transformation for both Dante and Ray. In the wake of their emotional showdown, each retreated into a labyrinth of memory and introspection. Dante threw himself into acts of service, not as a means to absolve his guilt, but as genuine attempts to reconnect with the humanity he had long forgotten. His once cold heart softened with every kind gesture, every shared meal with those who had been relegated to society's margins. In the quiet corners of community kitchens and old neighborhoods, Dante discovered that redemption wasn't a destination reserved for the virtuous, but a journey marked by a willingness to confront one's own imperfections. Meanwhile, Ray began chronicling her experiences with a fervor that astonished even herself. With every page of her notebook, she narrated the scars of a past marred by neglect and betrayal while also capturing the glimmers of hope that began to pierce through the darkness. Her stories resonated with the weary souls of the city, stories of struggle, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of a better life. As her narrative took shape, Ray started to see herself not as a victim defined by a single moment of calamity but as a survivor capable of transforming pain into power. Her voice grew louder with each retelling, echoing in community centers, social media platforms, and even late-night radio shows that spotlighted the triumph of the human spirit. Public sentiment, long divided by scandal and judgment, began to rally around her fierce determination to advocate for those who had been forgotten. In this interplay of solitude and shared humanity, both Dante and Ray found themselves slowly healing. Their lives, once disjointed by a single night of calamity, were now weaving into a mosaic of redemption, resilience, and the pursuit of a new dawn. As winter's chill seeped into the bones of the sprawling metropolis, a quiet revolution stirred within the hearts of its residents. Dante and Ray's metamorphosis was no longer a private ordeal but had become emblematic of the possibility of change in a city that often seemed impervious to hope. Dante continued to dedicate himself to causes that nurtured the forgotten, organizing charity events in deserted community halls, collaborating with grassroots organizations, and even publicly admitting his role in the tragic events that had upended so many lives. His transformation resonated with people who had long felt abandoned by a system skewed in favor of wealth and power. In parallel, Ray's burgeoning career as a storyteller reached new heights. Her writings, published in local newspapers and shared across digital platforms, sparked conversations about justice, accountability, and the importance of personal redemption. She spoke at rallies and community events with the raw authenticity of someone who had clawed her way back from the brink. "We all have scars," she would say, her voice steady and resolute. "But it is in sharing them that we find the strength to heal." The ice of cynicism that had gripped the city began to thaw as more citizens embraced the idea that every soul, no matter how broken, could contribute to a collective rebirth. Dante and Ray, once bound by circumstance and controversy, emerged as reluctant heroes in a narrative larger than themselves. Their personal journeys, tinged with the bittersweet flavor of regret and the sweet promise of redemption, had ignited a movement where compassion triumphed over cruelty. Under the watchful gaze of a city that was learning to hope again, their stories intertwined with those of countless others, forming a tapestry of resilience that promised a brighter future for all. As the seasons shifted once more and spring breathed new life into the city's concrete arteries, Dante and Ray were thrust into the throes of a climactic confrontation with their past. Public opinion, which had oscillated between scorn and sympathy, now demanded a reckoning, a final chapter that would resolve the tangled web of betrayal, regret, and newfound redemption. Dante, aware that the facade of reformed elegance could crumble at any moment, arranged a public forum where he would lay bare his soul. The event, held in a renovated community center where echoes of laughter and sorrow mingled, was heralded as a turning point for the city. Under a vaulted ceiling adorned with the remnants of past glories, Dante recounted the events that had led him to that moment of vulnerable honesty. "I was lost in my own darkness, blinded by pride and fear," he admitted, his voice trembling with the sincerity of a man laying his soul bare. Every word resonated with those who had experienced their own battles against inner demons. Meanwhile, Ray's role in this public catharsis was just as significant. Invited as the guest of honor, she took the stage with the gravitas of a survivor reclaiming her narrative. "Our stories are not defined by our worst moments, but by how we rise above them," she proclaimed, her tone commanding and resolute. The forum became a powerful crucible for transformation. Witnesses, many of whom had felt marginalized and voiceless, began to share their own experiences, sparking a communal outpouring of empathy and strength. In that charged atmosphere, the city itself seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The wounds of the past, though deep, were now acknowledged and mourned, setting the stage for authentic healing. Dante and Ray, each standing at the edge of their former lives, symbolized the eternal struggle between the forces of blame and the redemptive power of truth. The forum not only marked the climax of their personal journeys but also ignited a spark that promised to burn away the old paradigms and pave the way for a more compassionate future. With the public forum still echoing in the minds and hearts of the city's residents, the next chapter of Dante and Ray's intertwined destiny unfolded in unexpected ways. In the aftermath of that cathartic event, the relentless stream of media attention began to wane, replaced by a more reflective and introspective discourse. Dante retreated into a season of rigorous self-examination, spending long hours poring over letters, old photographs, and memories that chronicled both his fall and his slow ascent towards redemption. He revisited cherished moments with his late brother, each memory serving as a testament to a bond that had once given him strength and purpose. In the quiet corners of his study, Dante penned letters of apology, not only to those he had wronged but also as a form of atonement to the man he aspired to be. His writings, raw and unfiltered, revealed the inner workings of a man grappling with the irreversible consequences of his actions. Simultaneously, Ray's newfound platform as a powerful storyteller blossomed further. Invigorated by the public's response, she started a grassroots project that combined her passion for journalism with community activism. The project aimed to uncover untold stories from the city's less fortunate quarters, a quest to ensure that voices often silenced by society's indifference were finally heard. Walking through the vibrant streets, she engaged with local residents, listening intently to their struggles and aspirations, transcribing tales of everyday heroism that rekindled a sense of hope. These interactions not only helped her heal, but also enriched her evolving narrative, transforming raw pain into potent calls for social change. In the process, Ray began to see herself less as a victim of circumstance and more as an architect of change, a role she accepted with fierce determination. The parallel journeys of Dante and Ray, though filled with moments of quiet despair, were increasingly defined by their commitment to personal growth and collective healing. Their paths, once marked by scandal and secrecy, now resonated with authenticity and a promise for a future where past mistakes could be transmuted into wisdom and strength. In the months that followed, the city itself seemed to become a canvas for new beginnings, adorned with the echoes of both sorrow and resilience. Dante, embracing the transformative power of vulnerability, became a frequent visitor at local shelters and community centers, where the laughter and tears of everyday life painted a picture far removed from the sterile opulence of his former existence. Each shared smile and every quiet conversation with someone who had battled life's hardships ignited a spark within him, a spark that gradually transformed remorse into a commitment to make amends. His public appearances, once choreographed for scandal control, evolved into heartfelt interactions that bridged the divide between his gilded past and a reformed future. Meanwhile, Ray continued to flourish as a storyteller and activist. Her daily walks through the city took on a new rhythm as she absorbed the intricate details of urban life, a mosaic of persistent struggles, unexpected joys, and the underlying grit that bound the community together. Armed with a pen and an insatiable drive to illuminate truth, she chronicled tales of love, loss, and redemption in a way that resonated across social media and local gatherings alike. Her work not only garnered acclaim but also sparked tangible change, encouraging public discussions, inspiring local projects, and even influencing policy shifts in areas long neglected by authorities. In quiet moments spent reflecting on her journey, Ray realized that embracing her past, with all its scars and lessons, had become her greatest strength. The city, layered with the vestiges of scandal and retribution, was now a testament to the fact that redemption was possible even in the darkest of circumstances. Through every conversation, every shared story, and every act of compassion, Dante and Ray sowed the seeds of transformation, a legacy that would forever remind the community that even amidst the ruins of broken promises, hope could find a foothold and flourish. As winter thawed into a hopeful spring, the narrative of Dante and Ray began to capture the imagination of a wider audience, drawing in viewers and listeners from every corner of the metropolis. Their journey, a turbulent saga of mistakes, redemption, and the quest for authenticity, had evolved into a story that transcended individual pain and touched on a universal yearning for justice and renewal. Dante's new, unvarnished demeanor drew admiration, even from his harshest critics, his every gesture and measured word a poignant reminder that personal transformation was achievable even against overwhelming odds. With each act of contrition and every step taken to repair the damage wrought by past transgressions, he chipped away at the persona of the unrepentant millionaire, revealing a human being stripped of pretensions. Meanwhile, Ray's voice, once muffled by the din of betrayal and neglect, now soared as a clarion call to the oppressed. Her fearless recounting of personal tribulations resonated with countless individuals who saw a part of their own struggles in her story. From community forums to online platforms, her messages ignited debates, sparked solidarity, and inspired real-world action. "Our scars are not marks of shame but symbols of survival," she often declared, her words echoing in the hearts of an audience hungry for genuine connection and hope. As public sentiment began to shift, the media transformed from a relentless seeker of scandal into a cautious chronicler of change. Stories of Dante and Ray were now recounted as modern parables of redemption, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could be healed with time, truth, and mutual understanding. This metamorphosis of both character and narrative laid the groundwork for a powerful climax, setting the stage for the final reckoning that would tie together every twisted thread of their past with the promise of a brighter future. In the unfolding climax of their intertwined stories, an unforeseen twist emerged that sent shockwaves through the media and the community alike. A long-buried secret from Dante's past resurfaced with an intensity that neither he nor Ray could have anticipated. Rumors began circulating that hinted at a deeper connection between Dante and Ray, one that extended beyond the tragic accident and the subsequent tumultuous public saga. Whispers spoke of an uncanny coincidence, that years before the fateful night, Dante's estranged family had been involved in a scandal eerily similar to the circumstances surrounding Ray's early life. As these rumors gained traction, the narrative's complexity deepened, challenging the already fragile trust between the two. Dante, confronted with a past he had desperately tried to forget, found himself forced to reconcile with secrets that had haunted him for years. "There are parts of my life I've kept hidden, parts that I thought were best left in darkness," he admitted during a rare, tearful interview that aired live and sent ripples through the public consciousness. Ray, grappling with this emerging revelation, felt the sting of betrayal intensify. The idea that their fates might have been intertwined long before their collision on that fateful night shook her to the core. In a moment of raw confrontation, she demanded answers, her voice quivering between anger and desperate curiosity. "Was I just another chapter in a story you never wanted to tell?" she cried, her words laced with both sorrow and defiance. The ensuing turmoil, a maelstrom of media scrutiny, public debates, and personal anguish, threatened to unravel the delicate tapestry of newfound understanding they had begun to weave. Yet, amid the chaos, there was also an undeniable pull toward resolution, a shared recognition that the tangled roots of their past might ultimately provide the key to a more profound future. The shocking twist not only complicated their relationship but also set the stage for a final reckoning that would redefine who they truly were and the legacy they hoped to leave behind. With revelations now hanging heavily in the balance, Dante and Ray faced a crossroads that demanded an uncompromising search for truth. The weight of secrets and the relentless pursuit of justice by a city no longer content with half-truths compelled them to come clean once and for all. In an unprecedented televised town hall meeting that brought together citizens from every walk of life, both were invited to share their version of events, unfiltered and raw. Dante, his voice trembling with sincerity, detailed the labyrinth of choices that had led him astray. An honest recounting that included every misstep, every calculated decision, and every moment of regret that had haunted him ever since that disastrous night. "I was living a lie, a life built on illusions," he confessed, his gaze fixed firmly on the crowd that looked on with rapt attention. Ray, standing beside him, then spoke not just as a victim or pawn, but as a formidable storyteller determined to reclaim her narrative. "Our lives are rarely as simple as they seem on the surface," she declared, her tone resonant with both defiance and hope. "We carry our pasts with us, and sometimes the only way to move forward is to face them head-on." The meeting was electric, a powerful blend of pain, catharsis, and the palpable yearning for justice. Members of the audience, many of whom had seen their own struggles reflected in the duo's tumultuous journey, erupted in applause as the truth was laid bare. The town hall became a crucible of reconciliation and renewal, an event that not only reshaped public opinion but also paved the way for personal healing for Dante and Ray alike. In that moment, every hidden truth, every whispered rumor, and every shred of betrayal converged into a singular cry for accountability and transformation. And as they stepped away from the podium, both aware that their lives were forever intertwined in the eyes of the public, a tentative truce was brokered between their troubled pasts and a future filled with promise. As the dust of the public reckoning slowly began to settle, both Dante and Ray found themselves at the precipice of a new beginning, a moment when the wounds of the past met the healing potential of the future. Dante, embracing his role as a penitent soul, dedicated himself entirely to bridging the gap between the privileged and the overlooked. His days were now filled with long hours spent volunteering at community outreach programs, listening intently to people whose voices had long been silenced by the indifference of society. Each shared story deepened his understanding of the true nature of redemption, and each heartfelt interaction chipped away at the hardened exterior of a man who had once been defined solely by wealth and recklessness. Meanwhile, Ray's narrative took on a life of its own as she began writing a memoir, a raw, unflinching account of her journey from the depths of despair to the peaks of reluctant empowerment. Every page was imbued with the weight of lived experience, capturing moments of tender hope and searing injustice in equal measure. Her writing resonated with a diverse readership, sparking debates in local coffee shops, literary circles, and social media platforms. Ray's memoir became a symbol of her triumph over a past that had sought to define her, transforming her pain into an inspirational message for anyone who had ever felt lost or forgotten. The city, ever complex and ever-changing, watched with bated breath as these two disparate lives converged into a narrative that was both deeply personal and remarkably universal. Their once rocky path, paved with scandal and sorrow, now radiated the subtle glow of redemption. A beacon for anyone who believed in the transformative power of truth, accountability, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. With time, the whispers of scandal faded into distant echoes, replaced by a growing sense of respect for the individuals who had dared to confront their inner demons. Dante's efforts to rebuild trust within the community began to bear fruit as local leaders and residents celebrated his persistent commitment to change. His journey from the depths of despair to the humble acts of service became a rallying point for discussions about accountability and the possibility of reformation. Public forums where citizens shared their own journeys of healing were often held in spaces that Dante had once viewed merely as extensions of his influence but now saw as vibrant canvases of communal transformation. For Ray, the journey was equally transformative. Her memoir, having touched the hearts of many, spurred her to launch workshops and mentorship programs for aspiring writers from underrepresented backgrounds. In these sessions, she offered not just technical advice but also emotional support to those who, like her, had weathered the storms of life and come out stronger on the other side. "Your story matters," she would say with fervor, reminding each participant that their struggles held the seeds of extraordinary resilience. As both Dante and Ray embraced their new roles as community leaders and catalysts for change, the urban landscape around them began to shift as well. The city's parks, once neglected, started hosting vibrant cultural festivals and community gatherings that celebrated diverse voices and shared experiences. Local businesses joined the movement, and soon, what was once a battleground of broken dreams transformed into a mosaic of hope, creativity, and collective healing. Their intertwined stories, once marred by scandal and heartbreak, had been rewritten as modern parables of redemption, sparking inspiration far beyond the city limits and igniting a ripple effect that promised to foster change on a broader scale. Just as the city was beginning to embrace this new era of hope and mutual understanding, an unforeseen twist emerged, one that challenged every assumption and tested the resilience of both Dante and Ray. In a surprising and somewhat painful revelation, details emerged that indicated a hidden history connecting Dante's family to Ray's estranged lineage. Investigative reporters, always probing for the next big scandal, uncovered evidence that suggested the collision that had altered their fates might have been destined long before that disastrous night. Whispers of long-forgotten relationships, obscure family ties, and buried secrets began swirling through the media. Dante, known for his controlled demeanor, now found his every move under intense scrutiny as critics demanded to know if the accident had been a mere coincidence or the result of an intricate web of fate. Ray, already sensitive to betrayal, felt a renewed surge of conflict within her. Are we merely victims of history, trapped in a cycle of predetermined destiny? She wondered aloud, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. In private confrontations filled with bitter dialogue and tearful admissions, both sought clarity over the murky origins of their connection. I never asked for any of this, Dante murmured during one stormy night when the weight of legacy and personal responsibility pressed upon him. The revelation threatened to unravel the fabric of their hard-earned progress, reigniting old wounds even as they endeavored to stitch together a hopeful future. Yet, even amid this chaos, the spark of resilience that had carried them through their darkest times refused to be quenched. With the city watching intently, Dante and Ray took their first tentative steps toward unearthing the truth about their shared past. A truth that held the potential to either shatter their fragile bond or forge an even deeper connection grounded in the acceptance that some secrets, no matter how painful, were meant to be faced head-on. Determined to confront the complex tapestry of their intertwined destinies, Dante and Ray resolved to embark on a journey that led them into the heart of their shared history. Together, they pored over old family letters, faded photographs, and archival records that held the echoes of generations past. Every new discovery deepened the mystery of their connection, prompting long nights filled with quiet conversation and moments of painful realization. I never imagined that my life would be so entangled with yours, Dante confessed during one of their many intimate sessions in the mansion's dusty attic, where relics of bygone eras reminded them of time's relentless march. Ray, though reeling from the resurgence of past betrayals and unanswered questions, also sensed a strange comfort in uncovering the roots of her existence. The documents painted a picture of lives intertwined by fate. A saga of secrets passed down through the ages that lent an almost mythic quality to their modern struggles. As daylight faded, they would sit side by side, grappling with conflicting emotions, anger, confusion, sorrow, and an unexpected glimmer of acceptance. Their conversations, punctuated by moments of heated debate and quiet introspection, soon transformed into a shared quest for truth. While the weight of history threatened to overshadow the progress they had made, both began to see it as another facet of the path toward personal growth. The world outside continued to buzz with news of their revelations, but within the sanctum of their private exploration, Dante and Ray forged a bond that was both fragile and unbreakable, a promise that, regardless of the answers they might unearth, they would face their shared past together, armed with the courage to rebuild their futures from the fragments of forgotten legacies. In the midst of this profound journey into their shared past, the duo discovered a startling piece of evidence that shattered their previous assumptions. Tucked away in an old, leather-bound journal was a passage that hinted at a long-lost secret. A secret involving key figures in both of their families, whose fates had been irrevocably intertwined decades before either of them was born. The words on the worn pages recounted a forbidden love, a bitter feud, and an alliance forged in secrecy that had echoes reaching far into the present. As Dante and Ray read the passage together, the reality of fate's peculiar hand in their lives began to crystallize in ways neither had anticipated. "It's as if our lives were destined to cross paths," Ray whispered, her voice laden with wonder and trepidation. Dante, equally moved and disturbed by the findings, nodded slowly, his eyes haunted by visions of a legacy he had long attempted to escape. The discovery forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about power, betrayal, and the cyclical nature of history, realizations that made them question not only their own choices but also the forces that had silently guided them all along. The weight of this newfound knowledge pressed on them both, and yet it also provided an unexpected clarity. Here was the key to understanding that the night of the crash, the secret engagements, and all the subsequent twists were not merely random occurrences. Instead, they were chapters in an epic, predestined narrative of love, loss, and the relentless search for redemption. The revelation united them in a way that transcended the personal, sparking in them a resolve to break free from the chains of inherited legacies and to chart a future defined by their own choices. In that moment, as the winter sun dipped low over the horizon, Dante and Ray vowed to embrace the truth of their past, even if it meant risking everything they had fought so hard to rebuild. In the wake of their tumultuous revelations and the deep dive into their shared history, a new phase of transformation finally began to take shape. A phase defined not by regret and despair, but by a courageous embrace of the unknown. Dante, now freed from the chains of his carefully contrived public persona, started using his wealth and influence to foster opportunities for the city's downtrodden. Community centers bloomed under his patronage, art and literature programs were resurrected, and the age-old divisions that had once split the city began to show signs of healing. His transformation, marked by humility and a willingness to atone for past sins, resonated with citizens who once viewed him with disdain. Across town, Ray's healing took a more personal yet equally groundbreaking turn. Empowered by the truth of her lineage and the strength drawn from her own painful experiences, she launched an independent media platform dedicated to giving voice to the stories of those historically silenced by society's indifference. Her platform became a beacon for aspiring writers and activists, a virtual haven where the power of storytelling was harnessed to effect real social change. Together, though their paths had diverged in public life, Dante and Ray's journeys converged in purpose, a shared desire to reshape the narrative of a city steeped in history and hardened by neglect. Their intertwined destinies, once mired in scandal and secrecy, now shone as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of forging a future anchored in empathy, truth, and justice. The city, witnessing the emergence of these transformed souls, began to believe in the promise of a collective rebirth. A promise that the scars of the past could one day give way to the bright dawn of a reimagined reality. In a final, resounding crescendo of their epic saga, the intertwined destinies of Dante and Ray came full circle in a moment that encapsulated both their personal victories and the transformative spirit of an entire community. It was at a packed community celebration in the heart of the city, where murals of struggle and triumph adorned weathered walls and the laughter of children mingled with the solemn memories of the past, that they revealed to the world the power of truth and reconciliation. On that vibrant day, as the city gathered to commemorate its collective journey from despair to redemption, Dante and Ray shared one last, poignant conversation that would forever be etched in the annals of their shared history. "We are not defined by the mistakes of yesterday," Dante declared softly, his eyes filled with resolute hope. "We are defined by our courage to change and our commitment to building a better tomorrow," Ray added, her voice resonating with the passion of a storyteller who had reclaimed her narrative. Their words, embraced by an audience united by shared humanity, brought tears and cheers in equal measure. This final chapter was not an ending but a new beginning, a call for every viewer and listener to take part in the ongoing story of transformation. As the celebration reached its climax, they urged everyone to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with friends, and comment with their perspectives or the key lessons they had learned. With a final, unifying smile, Dante and Ray stepped forward together, a symbol of how even the most tumultuous pasts can give birth to hope, redemption, and a future where every voice matters.